there's a lot of interesting research happening at the moment that is theorizing that the Southern Cape of South Africa is in fact the heartland of humankind and human cognitive thinking because of its rich medicinal heritage of plants, its the honey in the mountains and the protein along the coastline. So yeah, and all of that overlaid on top of each other just creates such an interesting environment to be surrounded by.
Welcome to the Wild Herbs Podcast, where we unpack and uncover the healing properties of wild herbs so you can heal naturally with the plants beneath your feet. I am your host, April Punsalan, wild untamed plant lady, also a botanist, an ethnobotanist, and herbalist dedicated to teaching you how to heal with plants. If you want to learn edible and medicinal plants, you are in the right place, my friend. So I am super excited and thrilled because today you get to learn from a South African botanist and someone who is interested in conservation, that works with wild herbs, so completely in line with what we do here at the Wild Herb Academy. It's such a treat. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest. So his name is Finn Rautenbach, and he's a South African botanist, supply chain manager at Afrogetics, and he's the co-founder at Klein Karoo Medicinals. And his passion is for rekindling an intimate link between humans and their natural environment. This has led him to dedicate his life to the study and conservation of South African plants. And so I'm super excited to interview you today and for us to get to learn from you, because a lot of the listeners are in North America. We're not in South Africa. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn about what you are doing there in terms of wild plants and medicine, foraging, and conservation. So welcome to the show, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share about my passion. I mean, South Africa, I'm not sure how much you know about South Africa, but it has a really rich botanical heritage and an incredibly rich ethnobotanical heritage with over 3,000 recorded medicinal plant species. I mean, we're just at the tip of the iceberg with the species we're working with.
Wow.
But yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, and I will surely commit the rest of my life to it.
That's wonderful. And yeah, 3,000 recorded medicinal plants. That's unbelievable. That'll take you your whole lifetime and maybe some more. What about in South Africa? How many plants do you think there are in total?
Over 20,000 species.
Wow.
Plants. Yeah, we have the Cape Floristic region, which is one of the most biodiverse. Well, as far as I understand, it's the most biodiverse region for its size on the planet, and incredibly high endemism in the country. Lots of species that you can't find anywhere else. So yeah, an incredibly unique botanical geography that's overlaid with an incredibly unique cultural background, and there's a lot of interesting research happening at the moment that is theorizing that the Southern Cape of South Africa is in fact the heartland of humankind and human cognitive thinking because of its rich medicinal heritage of plants, its the honey in the mountains and the protein along the coastline. So yeah, and all of that overlaid on top of each other just creates such an interesting environment to be surrounded by.
Definitely. So where are you located in South Africa?
So I've actually recently moved back to the Garden Route, which is in the Southern Cape of South Africa. It's been a bit of a coming home. I was born here, and I really fell in love with plants here at the edge of what's known as the Knysna Forest, which is the biggest Afro-montane forest in Southern Africa. So yeah, really beautiful place. And I've just had 2 kids, and coming back home to my family after a couple years of traveling and working on supply networks around the country feels significant.
It's like a return home. We can raise children there. So I really want to hear about how your journey with plants began. But because we were talking about the geography, can you explain why you think there is 20,000 plants in South Africa? Do you think I'm imagining that there's all these different natural communities because of these eco-habitats? Or is it just because it's this special place and it has all these endemic...
Well, I think there's definitely a part of that is just an absolutely magical and wonderful place. But what will amaze you about South Africa is the diversity of broader environments. I mean, where I am now, there's what is called fynbos. So that's proteas, ericas, so lots of very intricate, fine, soft kind of plants. If I drive, well, right next to me is the Afromontane forest, which is practically a rainforest, massive yellow woods and ancient trees. And actually, in this forest next to me is South Africa's last elephant.
Wow.
And then over the hill, about an hour away, is pretty much desert. It's the succulent karoo. And the succulent karoo has the highest succulent biodiversity on the planet.
Jeez.
And then you have the rolling hills of the Transkei, which is grasslands. And I mean, you know how diverse grasslands can be. And then you got the thicket. I mean, there's just such a diversity of vegetation types, and that really lends itself to so many different niches.
You know, it's interesting because I applied to study the grasslands in South Africa a long time ago. It didn't happen, but when I think of South Africa, that's what I think of. And that's what I think a lot of people in North America think of, right? We think and we see the grasslands and we see the lions and the zebras running through the grasslands. And as you're talking, like I'm trying to visualize and feel the energy of these natural landscapes. And I'm just thinking about all of them probably have such amazing animal and insect fauna too, you know, the fauna and the insects.
Yeah.
And just in this like little tiny yard, the 0.7 acres that I am blessed to live upon, the insects and the animals are shaping the landscape in unbelievable ways. Right. And so I'm like, all those animals that are present that when we think about in South Africa, they are too creating that diversity. It's like this constant communication between the animals and the plants,
Absolutely.
you know, that's so fascinating. And we are a part of that, you know, we are a part of that communication. But anyway, so before this interview, I spent time getting to know you, you know, online and your presence and what you're doing. And the one thing that, you know, you say about what got you started into plants and plant conservation is that you were raised with this close, intimate connection with Mother Nature. Can you talk to us about that? And maybe during that sharing of your story, you can bring in how you think your path really leaned towards plants. Because there's so many things you could have chosen, but the green world really beckoned to you. Yeah.
I think that there weren't so many things I could have chosen. I think it was very clear from the beginning what was the
Nice.
choice.
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
was very privileged to be brought up the way I was brought up. As I mentioned earlier, brought up on the edge of the Knysna Forest. When I say the edge of my mom's property is right on the border of the forest. The forest is right there. So,
Wow.
I mean, I grew up. I often tell people the first time I wore shoes, I was about 12 years old. You know, we would just go out into the forest, and the river was our playground. And mostly we would be using medicinal plants from the area to treat our coughs and colds. And so these kind of things were kind of integrated into my life as common knowledge from a very young age. And I thought it was normal. And then I went out into the world and realized that what I was privileged enough to experience growing up was very much not normal to a lot of people. And this intimate link that I developed by not only learning about nature, but living in nature and feeling nature and being out in the forest. That was something I felt that I needed to share with the world. I thought that it was such a luck that I was able to experience it. And there's such a disconnect in this world. I think that disconnect is not something you can teach away. It's not something that you can teach people how to reconnect. I think it's something that people need to experience. It's something that, and I think that the way that people truly experience appreciation for nature is once they live in it, they become intimate with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where that kind of, I often explain it, is this facilitation of an intimate connection with nature is what really drives me, because that's where I feel the power is
I love that.
in real change. So after school, I went and studied botany. I went on to work at a botanical garden initially, which I ended up managing in the garden route. And all this time, medicinal plants were still very much in the core and in my upbringing. I had an environmental education facility that I managed at the Botanical Garden too, where we would take people from all over and take them into the bush and teach them about plants. And what I really realized there was specifically with young kids that I would take that were living like in rural communities around us.
Yeah.
When they would really light up, when I would say, "Oh, this plant, do you know how this plant was used, or is there any story behind this plant?" And they would light up because they would say, "Yes, of course we know. This is aloe ferox. This was used for stomach ailments. This is what my gran told me." And I realized that there was this underappreciated, deep medicinal knowledge that existed still in South Africa, and that really relit my passion and realization that this is where the big potential is. And yeah, that's when I was lucky enough to pivot my full career into medicinal plants, really inspired by that, and join Afrogetics, which it's a wonderful team. And yeah, from there on, that's been since about 2019. Yeah, I joined Afrogetics, and that's
2019.
been my work from then.
So what is your primary role there in Afrogetics?
It's quite a small team, so the primary role is fairly diverse.
Okay. So you wear a lot of hats.
Yeah, I wear quite a few hats, but for the first couple years, so one of Afrogetics' primary species that we trade in is Pelargonium sidoides, which it's not really very well used plant in America, but it's a very well used plant in Europe and the Middle East, a cough mixture.
Yeah, I was looking that up and I was really surprised that it was in the geranium family. And then two out of all the plants, you're using a plant from the geranium family. And so I would love to hear about what you think about the herbal energetics of that plant. Because when I work with geranium, the geranium in the front yard, which is Geranium carolinianum, and I know it's a different genus, right? But it's pretty astringent. Like it's really drying, this one that grows here. Yeah, I was curious about that. And I saw that you guys on the website say it's really good for the cold and the coughs.
So, yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely incredible plant, and it's one of the only plants I know with a near to black flower, which is really quite something to experience. You talk about the stereotypical South African landscape being the rolling grasslands,
Yeah.
and that's exactly where you find Pelargonium sidoides.
Oh, wow.
It absolutely thrives in the grasslands, and it thrives, interestingly, you were also talking about relationship with the animals in the areas. It thrives with grazing animals because the biggest risk to Pelargonium sidoides is actually bush encroachment. Bush encroachment on grasslands, specifically surrounding the whole idea of climate change and how that creates bush encroachment on grasslands. So there's been some interesting research where they've found Pelargonium sidoides populations within communal landscapes where there is active grazing actually being more successful than in kind of a more exclusionary landscape where bush encroachment is starting to happen. And so yeah, it's such an interesting species, and it's really one of those species that is so intricately linked with human being and the relationship with the landscape,
Yeah.
Beautiful plant, and it took me on some absolutely wonderful journeys into the rural Eastern Cape where we really were focused on understanding full traceability within the supply network. It's a very rural supply network where it's incredibly rural. I mean, you would be driving your car through some crazy roads for hours and hours and hours just to get to a mountain, to climb up to the top of the mountain to find where it's growing. So we really, to us, it was incredibly important to tell that sustainability story of understanding the full provenance of the herb.
Yeah.
Because it felt, specifically within the African plant, a wild plant kind of perspective, that there's quite an opaque nature to supply networks where you know more or less where it comes from, but what the harvesters paid, where the harvesters trained.
Right. Yeah.
From where was it exactly? Does that person have the correct, permits and training, and do they have benefit sharing agreements? What do they for the traditional knowledge that is used with the species? What do those entail? there's a real opaqueness about that within developing countries such as South Africa. And that wasn't something that we were really wanting to encourage within our own business. So that has been my focus since I've joined the business. So initially Pelargonium, and then I've also kind of tangentially pivoted towards Kanna or
Kanna.
Scaletium.
And so through your research with the geranium, do you think it is sustainable to harvest, wild harvest, and to supply?
So interestingly, we have done collaborative work with the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, where they did independent population studies of Pelargonium sidoides, and the population increased over the last 20 years.
That's good. So is it kind of a weedy species? Because I know the geranium in my yard is a weedy. So I'm like thinking like you could grow it.
So it is a pioneer species, so it does grow well in disturbed environments. You could grow it, but I have a thought around that as well. So within the rural Eastern Cape, which is where a lot of Pelargonium harvesting takes place, there is rolling hills of the most incredible beauty you could imagine. And these are communal lands. So it is not owned by anybody.
I love that.
It is owned by chieftains with rolling custodianship over the landscape.
Wow.
Which is really amazing.
There's
not many places you'll experience that. But what that does mean is that landscape can pivot very quickly. And the biggest risk to that landscape at the moment, if you're looking at it environmentally, is land transformation. Sand mines coming in, these kind of economic opportunities, which are quite extractive in nature. So when I think about Pelargonium sidoides, I think about it as a key economic keystone species in preservation of large-scale landscapes. So we think of keystone species within landscapes, and I call this an economic keystone species.
I like that. I like that.
And that means that because Pelargonium sidoides exists within a large tract of wild land, that land will inherently be preserved.
Yeah.
Transformation will not happen. The sand mine will not move there because 500 families harvest Pelargonium on that land. And we're not talking harvesting with tractors. We're not talking incredibly intensive harvesting practices. So the landscape at large remains intact.
Yeah.
So
I
actually think that as a species, even though you could grow it, and it does grow fantastically in cultivation, first of all, the medicinal properties of the plants that are growing in the wild are incomparable to what you can cultivate.
I would love for you to talk about that because, I do a lot of research on this. Yeah. And you can talk about it from Kanna and also from, what's the common name of the Pelargonia? Am I saying that right? The geranium.
You could call it African geranium. People call it that.
Okay.
Or you can call it uncalabo.
I think what is so important for people to realize, right, is that because a lot of herbalists grow the herbs and they're growing them from other countries and we're importing herbs. And from what I realize is that the wild plants have way more medicine, right? More phytochemicals, more chlorophyll, more all these things. And not to mention the intimate connection with the land, the mycorrhizae, the water, all these things, right? But you're working in a lab. Some of your work is in a lab and looking at these phytochemicals, and you're very well trained on this. And so I feel like you've spent a good bit of time to where you could educate us, or some of the most significant findings for you in comparison to like a wild herb that was harvested and that you studied versus like the cultivated. The grocery store no longer contains the food that your body needs to thrive. And Western medicine is just a disease treatment system. We desperately need people to learn medical botany so we can heal holistically and thrive. Unlock the secrets of nature in our medical botany course. Our signature medical botany course covers how to identify plants with precision, the phytochemicals in plants that drive healing, and how to get wild food in your diet daily for optimal vitality. You're also going to learn a step-by-step process for identifying the most important medicinal plants on this earth and how to harness their healing powers. Come embark on this 13-week journey so you don't have to depend on Western medicine and you can turn to nature for healing.
Yeah, I think once again it's really on a species to species perspective, and there's so much research on this, and despite the amount of research on it, it is still inconclusive because it's just such a dynamic system. I mean, there's actives in Pelargonium sidoides such as umquilin, and there's multiple theories of what affects those actives. It could be periods of very cold snaps. It could be the dry summers. It could be certain components of the soil in certain areas, dolerite. It's just such a complex situation.
Yeah.
And I think, taking it out of that natural, specifically for Pelargonium sidoides, taking it out of that natural habitat creates a medicine that is inherently different.
Yeah, I would agree. Because I've even noticed, like, within a wild landscape, right? For me, harvesting herbs that are more in the shade is better because they're less pungent, and pungent isn't good for my body type, being pitta. And so I'm really diving deeper into ecological herbalism, and even within like a 5x5 area where the ecological heterogeneity in that little tiny piece of land will affect the medicine and the same plant. And so it's so profound. And I don't think, and I reflect on this, I'm like, I will never understand. Scientists, we will never understand all the complexity of what this native plant is doing in the ecosystem, right? So like for me here, I let sea myrtle grow. It's called Baccharis helminifolia, amazing medicinal plant. But so many people get rid of it, right? And it's one of the most dominant in this landscape, which I think what I always teach students is like, you need to learn the natural community and learn the most dominant plant, because that's the plant that's carrying the energy, the frequency, and the medicine of the landscape. That's the plant you work with, right? And so for me, that's sea myrtle here. And I'm just reflecting, I'm like, it's doing something. It has this amazing relationship with the mycorrhizae. I can just feel it, right? Like what it's doing with the soil, what it's doing with the water table, what it's doing with the monarchs when they migrate, what it's doing for so much that I will never fully be able to comprehend, right? But for us to be able to tap into that and to know and to courage, right, this relationship with these wild plants and be like, hey, you're going to get probably the medicine that you need to get from this plant and the native habitat versus like growing it and bringing it in. Although in some cases, for people that are living in apartments that don't have that luxury, right, they do need to probably grow it in some pots. But anyway, I think it's fascinating that you're able to work with this wild plant and the communities. And I love how you shared how you see it. And this is so huge that the people that are harvesting it, right, that are still living connected to the land and getting resources from the land, like that's the key to the survival of not only their, existence, but also the plant. And that's ultimately what we want, in terms of conservation. Like that's the most beautiful picture.
Yeah, not only the plant, but the landscape. I think that's the important component, is that plant is what protects the landscape. So something interesting you said earlier is how just from, a small microhabitat, how the same herb can reflect such different chemical components. And we've noticed that in Scaletium, in Kanna. So at the same time when I was doing this supply exploration with Pelargonium, I started my work with Kanna, and it was actually one of my first projects with Afrogetics. We started mapping out wild Kanna plants and just testing their alkaloid profiles.
Wow.
To understand what makes a good Kanna plant in the wild and how could you emulate that within a cultivation setting. I'll explain later why the cultivation setting is important for Kanna. But what we found was you'll be testing 10 plants that are growing on a single hill, and each plant expresses itself differently. Each plant has different total alkaloids, different peaks of different actives within those total alkaloids. And why? I don't know. Maybe it's why my neighbor and I look different.
Yeah,
Just
very
individuals,
much.
you know.
Genetics. I would think the sun, though, really like what I'm noticing is that the sun, I think, increases antioxidant, right? Because they have to protect themselves from the solar radiation.
Mm.
So I would think that the sun is really driving that in a way, especially because, right, is it a succulent? Can you tell the listeners what is Kanna and tell us the Latin name and just give us like a little foundation because I don't really know this plant, right? Seen it on Instagram, I've seen it on Google, but I don't know it. And so to hear it from you, because you're living in its native range, and then we can come back to this just research you're doing with it and maybe who should work with the medicine.
So let me. I'm just going to step back and frame Kanna
Okay.
within its natural habitat. So I explained about this incredible floral diversity within South Africa. And there's this place called the Karoo succulent biome. And that is the most biodiverse succulent biome on the planet.
Mm.
And there's something really amazing about it because when you drive through it, you can barely see any succulents because there's these kind of bushes, and underneath the bushes is where the magic happens. That's where the diversity happens because it's this incredible environment. And the succulents use the bushes as nursery environments, as these little intricate homes for hundreds, thousands of different succulent species that live underneath these bushes. And Kanna is one of those succulent species, and it shares this delicate natural environment with all of these other succulent species, which make this succulent biome the most biodiverse succulent biome on the planet. And as I'm speaking, I'm sure you can start to realize why wildcrafting of this plant is maybe not the best idea.
I could see that. I could feel that definitely about it. When I even saw a
Yeah.
picture of it, I was like, oh, wild harvesting this plant, not sustainable. You can see how, I don't know, it's just beautiful little dainty plant that probably takes a long time for it to grow to that size.
Yeah, so it does actually grow fairly quickly, and it
Yes.
does it does actually react well to pruning.
Mm.
But it shares its environment with all these other very delicate species. I don't know if you've heard of lithops, the living stones, very interesting plants, and all these all these incredible plants that do take hundreds of years. I mean, some of
Mm.
these plants in the Karoo are actually dated back to 5,000 years old. It's quite amazing.
Wow.
Specifically, the actual nursery plants, like the bushes,
Mm.
Euclea undulata, very interesting. So it's really that delicate biome that you're interfering with when you're harvesting Kanna from the wild. And I mean, as you said, the world is waking up to Kanna,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people are starting to hear about it. And
Hmm.
and even though it's one of the first traded plants with South Africa to Europe, it's really now that it's starting to gain that global momentum.
Yeah.
I think we need it. I think the world needs Kanna right
Mm.
now.
And so why do you think that? When I looked at it, right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of rhodiola, right? You hear about rhodiola came
Mm.
in and it came in a hot, and then I look at its ecoregion, right? And growing on these, I think that like high elevation mountains, a lot of sun, it's a succulent. And I'm like, oh, it's able to deal with all this stress and it can create these antioxidants that protect us. So is it the same thing with Kanna?
Very much the same. Yeah. It
Okay.
deals with stress, and yeah, it creates some alkaloids that yeah, they just react fantastically with the body. There's been really good scientific studies on scaletium already. I guess thanks to the fact that it has been in the US for some time now. So there's been some good studies on scaletium. You can check them out. But yeah, it's a heart opener. If you
Oh,
really
it's a
understand
heart
scaletium.
opener. Oh,
That's
wow.
how, I mean,
I
if I
love
could take my science hat off and just
Yeah.
tell you how I feel when I use it, it is a heart opener.
Ah,
And that's why I say the world needs it.
I love that you say this because what I'm realizing with a lot of plants that get a lot of solar radiation, I don't know if it does, but succulent plants, I feel like carry the energy of the sun. And I feel like the sun is what the world needs for the heart, right? To open the heart, especially for people
Mm.
that are in dark places and depression. And so I love that you intuitively know the medicine, the energy that it's carrying. And I feel I am reflecting on this and I'm learning, like I just meditate on it. And I feel that these plants that carry this beautiful solar energy really have the ability to open the heart, work on the heart from an
Mm.
emotional healing standpoint. So tell us more. Tell us a little bit more about
So
Kanna. I'm
so
curious.
yeah, this realization that the world is starting to wake up to it and it's gaining momentum
Mm,
made us realize that there's a real need for significant sized, properly done cultivation of the
mm,
species. Because we as a company often deal with the environmental legislator in the country, like Cape Nature, specifically the environmental leg of the government within the Western Cape, and they are reporting increasing poaching of Scaletium from
oh,
wild environments.
that's not good.
It's not good at all.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, if the world wakes up to it and there is not a solid supply, there is not proper cultivation practices in place, that is what is going to happen.
This is why I feel like there's many, and I would love to get your opinion on this. Like, I feel as a botanist that there's so many herbs, right, that could do the work of Scaletium or these other plants that we overharvest. And this is where botanists come in, I think. And this is why I teach medical botany, because I feel like there's so many plants out there that have medicine, but
Mm,
just nobody's connecting with them. Do you feel the
yeah,
same? I mean, you have 3,000
absolutely.
plants where you are recorded, you know? And you have
Yeah.
like a, but if we can, like if people can find a different alternative to Scaledium, Kanna, or Rhodiola, and they can find the medicine where they are, right? That is probably the answer to that issue of people starting to poach it. Even though the people poaching it may be selling it in South Africa, you know?
Yeah, I think that the answer to people poaching Scaletium, and this is once again a species specific answer. I personally, within my context, can't give broad perspective answers. I think I
Right.
prefer giving answers that speak to the individual of that specific species.
Yeah.
And I think the answer with Scaletium is cultivation. It's a brilliant plant to cultivate.
Hmm.
It grows with an exceptionally small amount of water. It grows incredibly successfully from cuttings and from seed. I mean, we have proof of concept that we have now, over the last few years, planted out 120,000 plants,
That's unbelievable.
and they are growing beautifully.
What is your main way to extract it and to sell? Like, how is the medicine sold to your consumer or the person, the herbalist that wants to order the medicine? Is it tablet, like a powdered form?
So on the farm, this is Klein Medicinals, was the entity that was born out of this idea that we need to cultivate more Scaletium,
Mm-hmm.
and we grow the plant and then we treat it under controlled conditions. Once again, I think having controlled conditions in your drying, I think
Yeah,
post-harvest practices has such a humongous impact on the quality of herb that you develop.
it is. Could be night day. Yeah.
Exactly. Once again, talking about understanding where your herbs come from. Those are the kind of questions you need to be asking. What's the post-harvest practices?
I think you can know by the color of the herb when you open your jar and the smell, right? Because I
Yeah.
can usually tell. And so for some, like I have ordered sweet wormwood from this company that's in Florida, and their product is just outstanding. And I imagine that's kind of how yours is. Like I feel like I couldn't have did it better myself. Like I could not have harvested and dried that plant better than this company did. And I'll have to send you the podcast because it's interesting because it's a PhD scientist who researched this one strand and she did a plethora of research, her whole life dedicated, right? And then she sent the strand to a grower in South Florida. And so now he grows the product. So when I interviewed her, I was like, she told me about the product and I ordered it and I could not believe how beautiful it was. And I'm a huge, huge fan. Like the older I get, the more I'm like, it's not really for me. This is personal, right? It's not really for me and the tincture. It's not even necessarily for me and the glycerite. Really, where I'm really loving it is like the whole plant. So if I can get the whole plant ground up and dried in a capsule, I think it's amazing. And that's a lot of work too. And that's something I will never be able to do myself because I already tried with magnolia bark and it's too time consuming. You need like, to pack your
Mhm.
own capsules is a lot of time. And so do you guys offer that like a
Mm.
capsule with the canna ground and powdered?
So we're dealing bulk to other businesses, so we don't do the
Oh,
capsules.
okay.
Yeah, we do.
You do
We do
both.
bulk to businesses. Yeah. Mm.
Wow. How are they processing it to get it into the bodies of the people that need the medicine?
So yeah, capsules definitely.
Capsules.
Extracts as well. We also do have an extract that we sell. It's a spray dried extract.
Mm.
So it's an ethanolic tincture that is then spray dried onto tapioca powder.
What? So you take the,
Mm.
you make a tincture with the
Mm-hmm.
leaves. Are you using the leaves, flowers, and roots or just leaves?
So all of the parts above ground.
Okay, the aerial
Sorry,
portion.
all the up ground plants. Yeah.
Okay. And then
Mm.
you make a tincture and then after you're done with the tincture or it's extracted the medicine of the plant, you spray it on tapioca.
Tapioca powder. Yeah. So that's the holding agent for it. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the way that we share an extract. We export our extract because, of course, exporting extract itself is not going to be a practical thing to do.
Mm. So do you feel that the alcohol extracts the antioxidants really well?
So the ethanolic extraction is very efficient for the specifically the alkaloids that are in within
The
Scaletium that I
alkaloids. Okay.
personally, yeah, and it makes it water soluble as well, which is very helpful when you're producing products. But I also personally prefer to use the whole plant, like you. It's what I feel like a full body experience. I think the entourage effect is real. There's so many tiny components within these species that we still are yet to understand. And there's a reason that they all exist together.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I've definitely piqued my interest with canna and also the geranium. And the geranium, I wanted to ask you, is it the root that you're using?
Yes,
Okay. And
yes.
that's interesting. And so are the locals predominantly making tea with the root? Like if you had a cough or a cold, would you make a tea with the root?
Yeah. So you make a tea with the root. And so locally, it is actually used to treat their cattle with gastrointestinal issues with their
Oh.
cattle. That is actually the most predominant use of Pelargonium sidoides within the area traditionally.
Is
Yeah.
it when the cattle has like a parasite or like loose stools? Because I feel like,
Listels, yeah.
yeah, because the geranium
Mm,
here would be so good for that. And unfortunately,
mm,
like it grows all over my front yard, but I don't, and it's seasonal, right? But
mm.
I don't have as much of a use for it. Some other people may, right? But my body, not so much. But I'm trying to learn from it because it is native. So I'm watching it come in really just in this burst of energy in like the middle to late of the spring, and then it just disappears, right? So it like comes in and it's everywhere, and then all of a sudden it just goes. And so I feel like it definitely has a role that obviously is beyond me. So I'm just learning. Are there any, before we end, are there any plants that you feel that are calling your name? That maybe they don't even know, you don't even know if they have any medicinal use, or maybe it's just a plant that you have this intimate connection with that maybe the companies aren't carrying, that you just want to dive deeper in. Because I feel like you're a botanist. Everything that I got sent had Latin names. You say the Latin names and you're connected with the communities, you're connected with the landscape. Like, do you see yourself practicing with herbs that maybe aren't recorded, that you are going to allow yourself to like be open to explore these different plants that maybe no one's exploring?
So that's actually interesting that you say that. As I said, there's actually 3,800 different medicinal plant species within South Africa, and I think the world doesn't really know that, and
Mm-mm.
there's not really any kind of accessible shareable information on this, and I think it's kind of underappreciated, this
Yeah.
botanical wealth of the country. So I've actually taken it upon myself recently to start sharing short content on our different medicinal plant species. So, if your question is there any particular one species that I feel is underappreciated, I think all 3,000 of them are underappreciated.
Yeah. Or I mean,
um,
like you have a connection to, like you're drawn to the plant. Like you keep
Mm,
being drawn to the certain plants or a plant family, or maybe it's a region.
mm,
Just being aware of that. And being curious. Like, I know you're
mm.
curious, right? Because all botanists are very
Yeah.
curious. They're like, what is
Mm.
that? And I think that's the start. As soon as the curiosity comes in.
At the moment, I'm just so transfixed with the Clencaroo, because
Mm.
it's the vastness of that area that is kind of superimposed or juxtaposed with this deep, intricate focus that you need to really see the gems within the landscape.
Mm.
Because you're walking and it's just these massive canyons and cliffs and
Wow.
just really vast as far as the eye can see. But then as you start focusing your eyes, you see just thousands of different incredible plant
Mhm.
species all around you. And
That's
I
amazing.
I love that. I love that. I love walking the felt there and just feeling it. I think yeah, it's definitely where I've had my most mystical experiences in the last few years is just letting myself go in the bush over there.
Yeah, that's amazing. You'll have to send us a picture so we can share it. When we share this podcast, we can share a picture of that landscape. I'm trying to picture it in my mind's eye. So, where do you see your work going? Like, where do your path, because you have such a passion for these plants and these medicinal plants and the conservation of these plants. So, obviously, your work is really important, or your contribution and your passion is coming from a place of need. Where do you see this going?
So I really do believe that I'm working in service to the plants. I think
Mhm.
that when I started my work, Pelargonium, I needed to be in service with Pelargonium. I continue to need to be, but I'm now really fully in service with Kanna. I'm
Mm.
putting all of my energy into there, and whatever species calls me next, I will be in service there too. So I think to continue to really be sensitive to what I believe where my service needs to be focused.
Yeah.
I know that's a bit of a but it's the most honest answer I could give you.
No, it's a great answer. I think that is just being open and aware of what plant you're working with and for. I do think the plants will have a way of choosing. Like, I think in a way the path is bestowed upon people. So I always tell people that really love plants and that want, so you listening, if you love plants and you love plant medicine, then you really need to listen to your heart, and don't even look at what other people are doing. Just really
Yeah.
listen to your heart and work from that place, because I think the plants need all the plant people that are chosen. All the plant people that love plants need to step fully into their path with their whole heart. And that's what's the most important, because we are, as you know, we're losing so much biodiversity right now. And it's because, like you said, this growing disconnection. And I love how you touched on before we close. I just really want to bring back how you said that we can't teach reconnection, right? I am trying to teach reconnection all the time through these plants, though, but it's very much an experiential experience. Once the student learns the
Mm.
plant, then their connection, right? Then the plant becomes a teacher, and I step out. I'm just kind of a facilitator. So I love how you said that it cannot be taught. It has to be experienced. And I think that's such a powerful message right now, right? Because we have to just step into nature. And even for us that don't live like on adjacent to beautiful land, or we're not in a beautiful, like pristine landscape, you can watch the magic of nature just from one tree and the insects on that tree. That relationship. That's where I am just always taken back by the magic of what's going on in these intricate relationships. And then realizing that we are a part of that relationship. So anyway, I appreciate your time. Do you lead like trips in South Africa, foraging walks or plant walks? Do you teach?
Yeah, well, I do that, but not as much at the moment. I have two young children, and that's main focus is family. So unfortunately, the trips have reduced a little bit. But yes, it's definitely still something that I do. and
That's
I plan to do in the future. I do love it.
Yeah, I could see that, sharing your passion because you do it very naturally and from your heart. And so I will put links. What's the best way for people to follow your work? You said you're on Instagram.
Yes, I'm on Instagram. On Instagram, I'm Finn Grows, or on LinkedIn is where I post my more long form kind of written information. Or you can check out Afrogetics' website to see the work that we're doing.
I will post links to all your work. And thank you so much for your time. It was so much fun to kind of step into the world of South Africa and learn about the medicinal plants and what's going on. I know we could have touched on a lot more, but just learning about Kanna and the wild geranium and the work that you're doing. So head to the show notes for you listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and check out Finn's work. Follow him on Instagram and we'll stay connected. And thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Make sure you follow the Wild Herb Podcast so you can continually deepen your connection with wild plants and nature, the nature within and without. Stay wild and stay human.